Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jeff Dover. With me is John Barbin. Let's talk football.
NFL Week 18. The season is over.
Yep, end of the regular season.
End of the regular season, on to the playoffs. We're going to review, we're going to react to Week 18, best and worst, and some flour and some coal. I don't know. How'd you find this one? This was, man, there wasn't much to watch. It's painful with games that just don't mean anything.
I know it was, there was more games that meant something than I thought there would be, because sometimes the last week is really nothing, but there were some games that did have meaning, which I thought were good. But man, if you weren't careful, like there was all your QB number went way up this weekend.
Yeah,
right?
We're up to 65. I think we're up to 65 QBs now. 66 QBs have now played.
Yeah. So like there's every now and then there'd be sort of, I thought I was going to expect something at this game, but then there's, oh, this one has all the backups in it. I didn't realize that, so like you had to be really on top of it. But
yeah. All right. So shall I start?
Please.
All right. So working backwards from 3 to 1, best ever. Number 3 best thing I saw was just players hitting their bonus. So organizations actually being behind it, like, getting them to their number versus sitting them to save money. I don't even know if that's a thing. I do have a lump of coal for that later on, but it sounded like that was it was something the announcers bothered to point out, that good for these organizations to be behind Mike Evans for him getting his $3 million bonus, and Von Miller got 1.5 for getting a sack, and even Sam Martin on the Bills, $100,000, the punter, and it was like they punted on the 35, like the other team's 35, just to get him that one more punt, which is good for him. Like $100,000 matters to him, right?
Oh yeah.
Cortland Sutton got $500,000, and actually he played really well too. And then Geno Smith hit a $6 million bonus.
That's huge.
So those are the ones I had noted. I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones that I remember and thought, oh man, that's actually pretty cool that they all, it's cool that the teams were on board with getting them to their bonus instead of the reverse and trying to find ways to save money.
Yeah. No, and football is a real team sport. You need everyone to do their job in order for everyone to be successful. Like if the left guard sucks or is just playing for himself, then the whole offense isn't going to play well. So it's really it's a whole team thing. And over the course of 18 games, you can't be focused too much on the stats because everyone has to do their job in order to be successful, right? But when it comes down to one game left in the regular season, then all of a sudden you're like 3 catches away or something, that it's hard like not to think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but and the best one was the Tampa, like his teammates really went bananas when he had that again, and and good for them, is because they know what's going on, and it's really hard to be successful in the NFL for a long period of time. Like the average NFL career is quite short, so for someone like that, he had however many consecutive seasons with 1,000-yard receiving yards. So
I think it's 11 now or something.
Yeah,
that's just him and Jerry Rice. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's the number 3 best thing you saw?
Number 3 best thing I saw was the scheduling by the NFL, because they knew early on that they wanted the Minnesota-Detroit. There was going to be the biggest games. They moved it to Sunday night, right? So that was, and to me, that was one of the best games of the week. So that was a good move for them, because a lot of times they flex the games to Sunday night or Monday night, and they're not good, So that was a good game, good call for them. They also scheduled the games that where, depending on what the other team did, that would affect what you had to do. It put them at the same time, which is super important, because otherwise,
like Atlanta and Tampa Bay.
Yep, because otherwise in Kansas and Denver too, Kansas City and Denver with the Miami game. So like otherwise, if you knew it going in, if you knew the result of that other game going in, then it would really change what you would do, So
yes, good point.
So those it was really important that they had those scheduled like that. Otherwise, there would have been more games that didn't mean anything. And even having the Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game first was really good for that, because that was, once that one was decided, then you're like, okay, now we know what, then it's up to Miami and Denver what they're going to do going forward. Because if this was scheduled in a different way, none of those games would have mattered. You know what I mean? Like,
even less of them had a chance to matter. Right. Yeah. Which actually is a really good point, given that this week we're struggling to find any games that matter at all. It's a really good point that scheduling makes it such that some of these games mattered while we were watching them.
They take a page out of the Premier League. This is what they do. Like one of their last couple of regular season games, like everyone plays at the same time for that exact reason. Because you can't, as soon as someone knows you tie, then you're like, you don't have to win or whatever. And so there was big problems with that before. So so that was really good. And even still in the Miami game, because the Denver game was pretty much over, like then that the fourth quarter, that's where some of that stuff happened with Hill just choosing not to play, whatever. So, but that you minimize that based on the
Right.
scheduling. So
Yeah.
good for them.
All right. That's a good one. All right. So the second best thing I saw was on week 18 was the Detroit Lions defense. Now
Mm,
this is partly this is partly because of the amount of people they're missing and the narrative that they're going into the playoffs and this particular game fighting for the number 1 seed and home field advantage and all that stuff and the bye
mhm.
with 12 players out, like a significant pieces
And
on
important
defense
ones
out.
too,
Yeah,
right?
very
That the
important pieces out on defense. And they hold the Vikings to 9 points. And
yeah.
this is not a this is the Vikings are 14-3. This is a legitimate team. Put it this way, going into this game, no one was really sure who was really the better team here. But
Hmm.
by the end of the game, it looked like there's no contest here who the better team is.
Yeah.
And the one major, no one expects the Lions. Everyone expects the Lions offense to do what the Lions offense can do. That's probably the best
Yeah.
offense in the NFL. So that's not a question. The major question on the field was the Lions defense, and it ended up being the best unit on the field. 9
Hmm.
points. You held the Vikings to that. No one's holding the Vikings like that all year. And
No.
that offense looked inept, like utterly inept.
Yeah, and they was also part of your favorite thing is when teams can't score after first and goal or have a turnover and things like that.
Again.
So
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota had a lot of opportunities there, and Detroit stopped them with that. And it wasn't really Minnesota failing; it was Detroit stopped them.
Yeah.
So that was Sam Darnold was 18 for 41 passing. So
166
it's
yards
the worst he's looked. Like
all year.
and yeah, and you could tell the defense really handled it properly. And even though Detroit has a bunch of people out, they got a key person back, which is Anzalone, right?
Yeah.
For
Yeah. Yeah. Florida.
from
Florida.
Florida,
Go
and
Gators.
led the team in tackles. He had 3 solo tackles and a pass deflection. And so that really apparently seemed to gel the team on defense. And this was also my second best thing
Yeah.
that I saw this week. It was just the game itself. I had the whole game I thought was great. It was tightly contested. It felt like a playoff game. It
Yeah.
was and there was a couple of turnovers that seemed to make a difference. And when Minnesota didn't capitalize on that turnover really close to Detroit's end zone, then that was really going to be it. And it was really about the Detroit defense. So you're right about that.
Yeah. The intensity definitely was there, but man, the execution, I guess we could call it execution. The line I think is I know the broadcast was kept repeating that the defensive coordinator for the Lions had the balls to actually call man defense
Mhm.
against that receiving group and just
He did say that a lot.
we're gonna
Yeah.
go for it and he moved to a much more aggressive attacking style offense because if they were just going to sit back, that didn't seem to have worked against the Vikings all year,
Yeah.
and the Lions just went for it. And man, if that's the blueprint for beating the Vikings, they're going to be gettable by anybody.
Yeah.
If it is, I don't know if that's a blueprint or if this was just an anomaly today, but that is the most bottled up that offense has looked all year. And we're talking. There's Jefferson's out there, Addison's out there. The running back, everybody on this offense is capable and good. And 14 wins later, that's not an anomaly. That's how good that team actually is. And they just looked like they couldn't do anything here. So
Yeah.
and to an undermanned defense, all arrows would point that was he out schemed them and he just beat them. He just beat them on scheme because it isn't like just an overwhelming talent at edge rush because he's not there, or an overwhelming talent in the secondary. None of their best secondary players were there. Like they're so undermanned, it just seems
Yeah.
like he out schemed them.
Yeah. I was when I watched it, I didn't think it was the scheme so much as the Detroit was getting pressure with just 4 down linemen. And they're not the starters. So
Yeah,
that isn't a good sign.
they were getting
Right?
pressure
Because
on him more
they were.
than
They were they were absolutely getting pressure on them, which then made the coverage seem or is better. I don't know. But they were getting pressure with essentially their 4 backups, right? So that's not a good sign.
That does
I
not
don't
bode well for Vikings.
Minnesota's offensive line hasn't looked that bad all year. So I'm not sure what was going on, but it was the Detroit was getting pressure with Darnold was only sacked twice, but holy cow, could it have been more than that? Like it was because there was
Yeah.
some really he was getting really pressured.
Yeah. They had him off platform the whole game.
Yeah, and he was
Yeah.
under 50% completion
I
no,
mean,
and it's so
some of these stats here. Detroit won the time of possession 36-24.
it's a lot.
That is a
Yeah.
lot. 24 first downs to 14. This was
And you could see that near the end because Gibbs had a really good game
he had
and
4 touchdowns. He was just going off.
yeah, he had a really good game and they were not stopping him late, which is really when it's going to be tough when your defense has been out there that long.
I mean, it was domination across the board. The Vikings only got 260 yards total offense to 400 to Detroit. So, man, that's a bit of a statement game there, led by the Lions defense. So good for the Lions. All right, so then shall I move on to my number one best thing I saw?
Yep.
Michael Pierce, the interception.
Ooh.
That is the greatest thing. I mean, it was the game. That's why we get the Ravens shirt today for Pierce. It was the funniest thing. That game, it was just indicative of how dominant that performance was anyways. But the funniest part was him getting the interception, then immediately taking a knee, and then the post-game interview when he said the bus was out of gas. And he was just like, I'm not running any further. Did you see the post-game interview?
Yeah.
He is like, I don't want to be a meme, like enough linemen who get a big guys who get an interception, end up running and then fumbling it, then you become the meme. So it was just funny. His reaction was funny afterwards. The play was outstanding. Now it was a pretty bad pass, but I don't think the quarterback had any clue he was there. You don't expect a 350-pound D tackle to drop into coverage. So it was a design for him to drop into coverage. It's not like he was accidentally back there. He was there on purpose. And I suppose the pass was behind whatever receiver was, I think it was intended for, but it also could be the QB just did not expect to see him there because what's him of all people doing right there?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the ball looked hilarious in his hands because he was so big.
Looked like a tennis ball.
He's so big. And I love when the announcers, because as soon as he caught it, and they're saying it's like he's listed at 365 because it looks
bigger than that.
He looks like he's bigger than that. It's the helmet looks so small on him. Like it was, So that it was hilarious that he went down to his knees immediately.
Yeah,
and then because that doesn't count in the NFL, which I'm just going to chalk up to.
But does it not though? Like when you give yourself up, besides a forward slide, is it not like you've conceded? From what I understand, if you take a knee, you're conceding.
Yeah, I think that the rule is that someone could like fall down when they catch the ball, and you're not down until you're touched. So I get that the conceding part,
but a conscious effort in front of the refs to give yourself up was what he did.
I think that I looked at it as he slid on 2 knees, then got up immediately and started walking. So like it didn't feel like a concession. It felt like,
really? It was obvious to me. He's like, I'm not. There's way too far to go. I'm not running.
That's what he was doing, but it looked like it right out of a college play. Because in college you would do that. You take a quick knee and then you just start celebrating with your teammates.
This is what he did.
Right, but that's because in college you don't have to be touched down. In the NFL, you do.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
So I think he was playing college rules there for a second and just slid his knees and started walking. And then because you could see some of the other players and the opposing team were going to come up and grab him because
one guy did, and then he realized they were just celebrating, and it's like, okay, I'm not tackling this guy. And then the refs must have understood. They blew it dead too.
Say that, right? So that's the only as soon as. The refs is what ended it just by blowing the whistle because he was, but anyway, it's that was hilarious. And it was totally
awesome. I mean, and there's not much else to say. I mean, usually I pick a topic that leads us into talking about the game, but that really was the best thing. As soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, that's the best thing I've seen maybe all year. I think I texted you saying I already seen the best play of the 2024. Love it when big guys get the ball or get a chance at that. Kind of like Desmond Watson on the Gators getting a chance to run the ball. And one of our buddies texted me. He's like, Desmond Watson's my spirit animal. A 400-pound guy getting to run the ball. And during that game, I'm departing here to college for a second. I was so hoping he'd run for a touchdown.
Yeah,
it's just so much fun when big guys get a chance to run the ball, touch the ball at all.
Yeah.
Anyways, but the Ravens are going in looking really strong. I mean, obviously that's just the Browns, but it was still a legitimate game. They needed that. They needed to win that game to secure the division, right? So that mattered depending on what depending on what the Steelers did, which was not good.
No.
All right. So what's your number one best thing you saw?
Yeah. So the number one best thing that I saw from the NFL was the Cincinnati Pittsburgh game. I thought
Yeah.
it was fantastic. It was a great game. Burrow looked amazing. After they had won, I was like, "Oh, I'm so excited for them to be in the playoffs," because I know they needed to win in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
But it obviously didn't work out that way, and I'm really disappointed we don't get a chance to see him because he was amazing. We always harp on teams that are one dimensional, right? Like that was Seattle's problem all year because they couldn't run the ball. And in the NFL, they're too good, and they're too good when you know you can't do one thing, they
Yep.
take something away. That Cincinnati seemed to be the exception because they knew they didn't have a good running game. Their starting running back was out, and it really felt like they abandoned the run at one point, and they were just going to go to pat, and it was still working because Burrow had a great game, passed a lot, and Pittsburgh doesn't have a bad defense, and it was still enough points for them to win. So that was a good game. It really did feel like at one point that Pittsburgh had a couple opportunities, really didn't take advantage of it, which would have
Yeah.
they could have won that game, but hats off to Cincinnati. That game felt great. It felt like another playoff game, where both
Y-
teams wanted to have it, and it was good.
It mattered, but this was one of the few games in Week 18 that mattered to both teams. So
Yeah,
for the Bengals, this is you have to win to even keep your playoff hopes alive. And the Steelers were fighting for a higher seeding, which would have, I guess, given them home field if they won that game.
I think so.
I think so.
Because
So
now it's at Baltimore, which is a big
right,
difference.
they're gonna get killed. So that game mattered. That game mattered for both teams. But we'll revisit this on the worst ever. But let's stick on the best ever here for the Bengals and the game being competitive. And Bengals defense, well, I guess Pittsburgh's offense wasn't that great, but an actual low scoring Bengals game where the Bengals actually won a low scoring game, which just doesn't happen. It hasn't been happening this year, but it happened right here, which is, again, it's sort of, if anyone's been watching the channel, the Bengals have been one of my wagons. I've been hoping for them to get into the playoffs, and I'll say it again. It's because Burrow's one of the only players who's proven to be able to compete with Mahomes in the playoffs and actually beat Mahomes in the playoffs. His absence leaves the AFC with nobody who's beat him in the playoffs, essentially. Not any time recently. He's got one over on everybody, including Allen, including Jackson. There's no reason to think anyone can beat them now in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Or at least it will be the first time, right? So that's why I was always holding out for the Bengals to get in there to give us at least one more competitive team, but they didn't make it. And it's just too bad. It was just too little too late. This team, that's an MVP caliber season for Burrow that's just ends up with missed the playoffs, and that's it. Might just fade away. And I don't know. Does the MVP ever get given to a guy on a team who's never been in the playoffs? Maybe, but
that depends. That's a whole nother debate.
Much.
Yeah, that's a whole nother debate about what the MVP is. If it's like statistically the best season or actually the most valuable player, because that's what people argue all the time. But because it does, if that's the case, it wouldn't always have to go to a guy on a winning team, But you
could argue they should, if it wasn't for him, instead of 9-8, they could have been 4 and 14 or 4 and 13 or whatever it is. All right.
Just to decide on that Cincinnati Pittsburgh game too. So was the game closed? The line was Cincinnati by 2.5, and the over under was 47.5, and so Cincinnati won by 2, and the total was 46. So if you don't think that Vegas has an idea about what's going on,
that can't be 46.
It was 20. It was 19-17.
No, that's 10, 20, 29. You mean 36?
36. My bad.
Yeah, you're way off.
So there was.
You're way off.
Yeah, 36. So, but still close. But anyway, that was my point.
Okay. Moving on to the worst ever.
Yeah.
Or do we cover your best ever? Yeah, we did. Okay.
Yeah.
The worst ever. Number 3. Dolphins, 4 consecutive turnovers on 4 turnovers on 4 consecutive drives. I know that it's not Tua, but this is still a team where, to your point, this game mattered. This wasn't just going through the motions, and you finish 4 drives in a row with a turnover. That's just horrifically bad. I mean, maybe this is just a statement on how badly the drop off is for some of these teams when they move on to their backup quarterback. I mean, how many teams in the league actually have a backup you would trust? I actually trust Cooper Rush now.
Yep. Malik guy at Green
Willis.
Bay.
Malik Willis, I trust him.
Yeah.
Flacco, more or less, he can put up points. How deep or any other quarterback rooms where you really trust the backup to to actually be able to win a couple of games and games that matter too. So maybe this is just indicative of what you get. But man, for Dolphin fans, that sucks that this team is one of the 3 or 4 teams on this weekend that are competing to maybe get into the playoffs. And that's right in the middle of the game. You go on a 4 series in a row where you turn the ball over, all 4 of them, and all of them were on Huntley too. 2 picks and 2 fumbles, and I think they were all him, which is really bad, or at least 3 of them were. So that's just it. The reason it's on my worst ever. Obviously, other teams fumbled the ball and other teams threw interceptions, but this was one of the few who mattered. This is one of the few teams that the play a chance of the playoffs was on the line here, and that's not going to get it done at all.
No, I had this on my third worst too for the worst thing I saw, but for other reasons like Hill not playing the fourth quarter. This is it's really rare to see someone choose not to play in the NFL, like because it's really hard to make it in the NFL, and you want to, and they do in general. There's a really good culture about playing hard for your other teammates, and and things like that. We just spoke about how everyone has to do their job in order to be successful, but that's. I guess that someone might have had an idea about what the Denver score was because that game was happening at the same time. And so that was really going to be eliminating them. And so, but just not playing the fourth quarter. And it's the Jets, like they were 4-12 going into this game, but this is a game Miami should have won. We've talked about that in previous shows, like when a good team is like they did what they're supposed to do. Right. And you give them flowers for that because that definitely does not always happen. So the Miami was had the possession. They were up 32 minutes to 27 or almost 20 minutes for the Jets. They had 21 first downs, but they had 4 turnovers. So and you're not going to win.
You can't come back from 4 turnovers.
No, can't do it. So just So between that and I just can't believe that was their chance to make a statement. They needed that game and they didn't get it done.
No. What's the future there? Is this team?
I have no idea. I mean, it seems like it's not good. If Hill's like already, says I want out of here or something, like it doesn't feel like it's that good right there.
I don't know if Hill's made any public statements, but it seems like he's not all that thrilled.
He did. He made a statement saying I might not come back. Kind of thing. He implied
an implication of that is that's the polite way of saying he's not coming back. He probably just sees the writing on the wall and this team's not good enough.
It's the first time he's ever missed the playoffs, he said.
I think we're going to look back 5-10 years from now as this past 2 to 3 year stretch with all the quarterback contracts, including Tua's and Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, this Kirk Cousins just now. I think we're going to look back at this as the quarterback bubble, probably along with the wide receiver bubble, and realize all of this was way overpaid. Like Tua's, since that contract, he can't play a full season. I don't think he played one before that, but he hasn't maintained like a full season after the contract. He keeps getting hurt, concussions or otherwise. Kirk Cousins, that was a complete waste of money. Like he's benched and probably never going to play again for the Falcons. Trevor Lawrence, pay him $270 million. He doesn't play. So and then some of these receivers, Ayuk, pay him $30 million. He's out. So and the thing is, you don't, players like Malik Neighbors or Robinson Jr. show that you never actually needed to spend that much money to get that kind of production. Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, look at the production you're getting out of guys who cost a fraction of what a team like the Niners just dumped a bunch of money on a guy who doesn't even play. So it's sort of, I think we're going to look back and these all at Deshaun Watson. It just goes on and on with money being paid for players either don't play or just don't play to the number. And for the few that did, it seems like there's more that didn't. Like Josh Allen's deserving of the money. Joe Burrow's deserving of the money. Then all of a sudden it's like all these other quarterbacks who aren't at their caliber are just getting the same money. That money should be reserved for the few who are in that MVP caliber, like Jackson.
And it's really tough too in football. Like I don't envy the GM's job because there's so many people. Like there's so many starters on offense and defense, and you have to have backup and special teams and stuff. So when a lot of money goes to one person, that's a lot of people that you have to offset the difference with and
Yeah.
field a competitive team, so when you have one that doesn't work out, I feel like it really makes a difference here. Like, it makes a difference in every pro sport, but like
Yeah.
it's really bad here when it's,
Yeah.
because you can get like 5 or 6 good players for a couple million each, kind of a thing, as opposed
Yeah.
to, so yeah,
Well,
no,
some of
just
the
really,
highest performing receivers this year, all on their rookie contract. They're all
yeah,
cheap.
Bowers
Even Bauer, yeah,
led the league in
even
receptions.
even Jamar Chase hasn't been re-signed yet for anything big.
Yeah.
So you've got a bunch of guys, and then T. Higgins is on a franchise tag. So there's just not a lot of money going out to the highest production receivers,
Hmm.
and there is a ton of money going out to a bunch of QBs who've done nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just, I guess, just the Dolphins. This was a jumping off point that all that money's on Tua. He's not even playing. Tyreek Hill's getting paid a bunch of money. Couldn't be bothered to play anymore. Wants out. It's. I think we're going to look back as this was a GMs are probably going to be gun shy for dumping that money after how much of a mess all of these contracts have turned out in the recent years.
I hope so. I mean, I don't think anything's going to change, to be honest, but they
Really,
maybe. No, I mean, it's those
maybe
are it's
maybe
just the way it's just been going up ever. Like,
the
and
agents
so,
have been just bending these GMs over and just
oh, I
having
know,
their way with them.
but that's I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
I don't see it changing. It should. Don't get me
It
wrong. I
should.
I agree with you,
All right.
but I don't see it changing.
All right. Well, all right. So, second worst thing I saw was the Falcons defense.
Hmm.
Here we go again with a team that this game mattered, at least at the time of the game was happening. Now the
Hmm.
Bucs won, so it turned out that it didn't matter. But as the game was happening, the Bucs, to your point, the Bucs game was happening, so they didn't know.
No.
They didn't know that they eventually were going to be knocked out of the playoffs by the Bucs. But this game mattered as far
Yeah.
as they knew. They were playing for the division and a playoff spot, and you give up 44 points to the Panthers. No offense to the Panthers, and flowers to Bryce Young for
Yeah.
accounting for five touchdowns. That looks like it's going to actually be a fun team next year.
Hmm.
But in a game where the team across the field is playing for pride, which is
Hmm.
fine, but you're playing for the division and a playoff spot, and you give a 44 point, like, that is what's going on. Especially you put up 500 yards, and you put up, what is this? You had 227 yards in rushing, and you lost that game. How do you put up 227 yards rushing, 312 yards passing, 38 of your own points, and you lose? That's not a
Hmm.
losing box score. That's just really, really bad.
Hmm.
Just really bad defense. So I mean, to me, the arrow still is pointing up on the Falcons, but man, that defense has got to get sorted out. Like, Michael Penix looks like he's the answer here at QB. He looks poised. He looks in rhythm here. He doesn't look like this is what, his third start. Doesn't look like that at all. Looks like he's just a veteran NFL player here.
Hmm.
But holy smokes, that defense, that's not going to cut it at all.
Hmm. Well, and again, hats off to, like you said, flowers to Bryce Young. What a weird difference between the first part of the season and the second part,
Mhm.
because he started the season. Here's his passing yards: 161, 84, 58, -4. Okay. So those are the first, and then, like, out of the last 8 games, he had 251, 219, 298, 263. Like, he had a 203 in there. Like, it's not bad. Like, really
No,
turned it
this was
around.
one of his
So
best performances all year.
yeah. So that's yeah, he had 225 for 34, 251 yards, 3 TDs, no sacks.
Yep.
That's hats off to him. So really, what a really amazing turnaround for him.
By the end of that game, I thought, okay, so these might be the two most interesting teams in this division moving forward. If this last sample of Bryce Young is what he might be able to start next season off with,
Hmm.
and actually be a competitive team that can put up points, and if Michael Penix is going to continue to improve, and that's, like, it would be really cool if this is the future of the NFC South, is these two leading the way. Now,
Hmm.
Baker Mayfield still has plenty of football left in
Yep.
him, and I think he's just going to be there. Like, him and Tampa are a marriage that I think is just, that's it.
Yep.
Hopefully he spends the rest of his career there. So that's kind of fun too. There's only one team that needs to sort itself out in that division now. Like, all of a sudden, that division looks like it's got 3 quarterbacks in place,
Hmm.
and the New Orleans Saints, who knows what's going to happen there. Nobody on that team should be starting for that team next year. There is no quarterback on that team right now.
No.
But at least you've got 3 others that look like that could be the nucleus of a fun division for a number of years moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, so the second worst thing that I saw in the NFL this season was the Pittsburgh's offense for the first 3 quarters, and then the decision for Cincinnati to whatever they were doing on defense to change it and go to a prevention or a defense or something like that, because Pittsburgh looked amazing after that once they backed off. And I don't understand that. I don't understand with what you're doing is working. Now I get it. It's a low scoring game and you don't want to have like a big play to change anything. But as soon as the Wilson looked terrible for 3 quarters, solid, like not doing anything. And then they go to they back off to make sure they prevent any big plays. And then all of a sudden he starts completing stuff. And then all of a sudden makes it a game near the end,
Right.
like when I just don't understand that decision making. So it's to give you an idea of how bad Pittsburgh's offense was, Cincinnati only had 314 yards on offense. They won the game. They only gave up 193 yards to Pittsburgh and then promptly fired their defensive coordinator, Cincinnati. So even though they just held them to 17 points and 193 yards because over the body of his work has been not good enough, like for their defense.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So the guy that just lost his job, like that was the guy you couldn't score on or move the ball on. Like that's really bad.
Right.
So I don't understand the decision to change up what you're doing when it's working, even if it's late in the game with you want to prevent a big score. And I don't understand.
Okay, so that fair enough to be chair. And this is my number one worst thing was the Pittsburgh offense and George Pickens specifically. But to be charitable to Pitt, oh God, how bad is he? What has happened to that guy?
I know.
First of all, again, I said this a few weeks ago, but what is with the Steelers always having the one receiver in the league who acts like a petulant brat kid, like Antonio Brown? Do they just get like a mental disorder when they go to Pittsburgh and just can't control themselves? Yeah. But Pickens looks like he's something psychologically wrong with him in the last 5 weeks, like constantly getting into it with fans and being distracted. Like what the hell is wrong with this guy?
And you're a big Pickens guy, because how many times this season we say like, unless Pickens plays,
we're betting on the Steelers unless if Pickens doesn't play, then we're not taking them to cover
most of the time, because he is or can be a difference maker. So it's when
he's on, you put him in the top 5 for downfield contested catches. He comes up with wild catches.
Yep.
And this game, if right in his hands, he can't catch it.
Yep.
Which I think is a psychological thing. I doubt it can't be a physical thing because we know he can physically do it. So something's off with his focus or whatever's going on. He had 1 catch for 0 yards on 6 targets. And out of those 5 that weren't catches, I think 3 of them were just blatant drops. Yeah. Now, maybe there was a contested one in there, but I'm used to Pickens catching anything contested. It's the catches he has made.
General direction.
He might be top 2 in that, top 3. Like obviously Justin Jefferson's in there and Chase is in there, but if my memory throughout the year, if I'm like, think of like the top 5 or 6 crazy contested downfield wild catches you've seen, Pickens jumps to mind immediately. Like I have to think a little bit more about the others. I know lots of other guys have had them, but Pickens has so many of them and they're so dramatic that it's obvious this guy can do this. And in the last number of games, he was injured, and now that he's in, and then complaining about getting the ball, and then nothing hit him right in the hands, or for sure a Pickens catchable ball, and he ain't catching them.
Yeah.
And without him, this team has 0 chance.
Yeah.
And sure, to your point, the Bengals inexplicably let them just start marching after holding them to essentially nothing. Now they also did a hurry up, and they were catching the Bengals a little bit out of sorts towards the end of the game there. It was almost desperation. Even the announcer said, when you go hurry up, you almost can't think about things. It's just all on autopilot, automatic.
Yeah, I thought that was their way of trying to, to me, it was solely the defense that Cincinnati was in, the way they were scheming that, because it was just, they backed off everything. They backed off the pressure. They backed off the coverage. And then, which allows the easy completions, the quick completions, which really matches up with the hurry up. So like, I don't, like, yes, I hear what he was saying where like, when you don't have to think about it, then it's...
Well, they partly facilitated it by the way they were calling the defense.
I thought it was fully facilitated by that. And then allowed which then allowed Wilson to like get a few completions, get a little more confidence in the, which was
And even
terrible.
with all of that, they couldn't do it. The
Yeah.
Steelers. So part of them being my worst ever is they're limping into the playoffs with no offense to speak of, and they're going to get killed in the first round. This team's, there's just nothing here, and that stat is not good. That the last time they actually won a playoff game was 2016, so that's like 8 years ago. So Tomlin's this odd coach who gets in the playoffs all the time, has winning records all the time. There's some odd stat, like he's one of the only coaches like that who's just hasn't had a losing record in a long, long time. But I don't know, Steelers fans, is this like, do you really like this? Like getting 10-6 type of team and then no real chance in the playoffs. Like it's obvious. There's no chance
So it's
here.
Pittsburgh at Baltimore. The line, we'll do our preview show after this one, so tune into that.
Line's
but it's
huge.
The Pittsburgh at Baltimore. It opened at 9 or 8 or something. It's
9.5 right
it's,
now.
It's 10 right now. I got.
It went up again.
ESPN.
Okay. Wow.
And what's crazy about it too is that, because I had this on one of my picks, we'll talk about in the next show, but it was the over under. The total was 45.5. So again, it's weird when you have a high line and then a relatively low total, right? Because that's a pretty specific middle, and the total's gone down, even and the line's gone up. So it went from 9.5 to 10, and it went from 45.5 to 43.5, which is super weird, right?
So they're expecting like
30 to 10.
30 to 10 or 35 to 3. Yep. They're just expecting the Steelers the Ravens to crush the Steelers here.
Yep. And it'd be hard not to. Like that's pretty much how I think it's going to go.
If this Steelers team shows up, this week's Steelers team and this week's Ravens team shows up, that's exactly what we're going to get. We're going to get 35 to 3.
Defense is not good. They fired their defensive coordinator and held them to 17 points, and they look back. Yeah. Baltimore's defense has been amazing the last few games.
The last, 6 to 7 games
or something.
They made a few changes. They moved a couple people.
Yep.
Which it's stunning to me that just adjusting where the same personnel play makes that much of a difference.
But one personnel change, but then that sort of shifted a bunch of people over.
And Kyle Hamilton, he's just not fair. That's an X factor player. And but the same thing happened on the Lions defense. They just moved a couple people. The one guy that was covering Jefferson all game long. Mm-hmm. They're just like, I can't believe he's handling this. And they just moved a particular player from the slot to the outside or vice versa. And they were pointing out that, boy, that one change made a big, big difference. And I guess that also shows you that in the NFL matchups, offensive coordinators are always looking for a matchup. They're trying to get their best player on somebody weaker. It's almost like the pick and roll in basketball, and then you just get the switch, and now you've got the favorable matchup. Mm-hmm. In the NFL, you're trying to get a Jefferson or Jamar Chase on, if you can, a safety or somebody who's not the best cover corner, and then you just pick on that guy. Or definitely if a rookie comes in or if someone gets hurt. But obviously they've done a couple of things. Specifically, when I say they, I mean the Ravens and the Lions, especially the Lions with a depleted defense, and have figured out against a team with those type of receivers, with Jefferson and Addison, how to contain that offense and control it with whatever personnel's on the field. And it sounds like some of their secondary moves, just moving players around and getting a couple people back, mattered big time. So, I mean, the Ravens look like the most complete team going into, at least in the AFC going in. And apparently the Lions, even depleted as they are, they look complete over there.
Might get Montgomery back next game too, which was not that they need any help because Gibbs was just as good.
Gibbs is going off.
But that also helps.
It'll preserve him from getting broken down.
Yep.
Anyway, so that was my worst ever, and I guess we're just on to your worst ever.
My number one worst ever thing was just that I'm a professional podcaster.
Yes, you are, Jeff.
And I'm a football fan, and that's what I like to do. And I was still having a hard time keeping track of like what games mattered, what games didn't, and then who the heck was playing in them, right? Like I got really frustrated when like Jalen Daniels all of a sudden wasn't playing the second half. Whether I couldn't understand if that game still meant something or didn't mean something. I don't know who Chris Oladukin is, the third string QB for Kansas City, who got in there at the end. Not sure why he was playing. And it's the.
I have to add that to my list. We're up to 67 QBs then.
Yeah, that's why it was. It was 0 for 0 in terms of completion attempts, but he got sacked, so I think that counts as he's in the box score as the QB. So, but yeah, like it's just that's the only bad thing about the last regular season game in pro sports is when some things are already decided, it doesn't matter. And it was changing as the day went on. And I gave it as one of my best things for the schedule, which really made it good. Like there was more games that mattered than I anticipated, but this was there's still some things that happen in these games where I'm like, really? What's they're not,
Yeah.
Hill's
It,
not
it
playing now? Why? Like it's just weird. So
it's just I don't think you can solve this. It's just the effect of games, most of the playoffs spots being decided, and what like the games just don't matter, and the players can choose to either fight for a bonus, or they can choose to preserve from an injury risk. So it's sort of I guess the breakdown here is it's now you have to try to decide what are the motivations of them, and
Mhm.
the one major motivation we all expect to see is, well, they're trying to win the game. But
Yeah.
when that's out the window,
Yes.
and the game and the winning the game's irrelevant at this point, then you're just, oh, what's going on here? Are you playing for just a bonus? Are you playing for, you're not playing, you're playing
Yeah.
half the game, you're playing just until you get somewhere and then get out. So it's kind of, again, on this podcast we're talking about the entertainment value, and that's not entertaining. Seeing
No.
backup players, or seeing players who couldn't be bothered to play, or only playing part of the game, and just games that just don't matter. Like
Yeah.
if a
Even
game just
though
doesn't matter, why are you even watching it?
Right, and even though Kansas City was blown away, we knew going in that they were resting everyone. They had
Yeah.
nothing left for them, to finish. So it made sense to start all like the backups, but at least that like you knew it going in. And so it's just some of these things that felt like was last minute stuff or switched in the middle of the game. All of a sudden the guy's not playing anymore. And like those things were disappointing.
I wonder if Vegas has it. I guess they can't really know. Like, how would they know if that's happening? How could they set the line knowing a player's just going to, middle of the game, just decide to sit? Or
Yeah, I
I
don't
wonder
know.
if they have inside information
They,
that
some of those
odds
bets,
are a player will be sitting after a certain number of
I think
plays.
that really they try to stay away from that because then that really what you would want to do then if you're a sharp better is contact a player on the team or a personnel and be like, "Hey, what's the deal
Oh,
with this
yeah.
guy?" And
Then it leads to
you don't want to get
tampering. Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
want to get involved with that.
Like
No,
CJ
so
Stroud's a good example. He played he went 6 for 6 or whatever, and then that was the end of him
yeah, so
for
like
that
it's
game.
so I think some of those I think the bets would be off. Like so if there was a Stroud like over under 200 passing yards, that they might not pay out if you went under and he only had 6 attempts and was benched or something. I'm
Oh,
not
I
sure,
see.
right?
Yeah.
So
I don't
you
know if
just get
that's
your
even a
money
thing.
back because I don't know, but so
Hmm.
anyway. All right, so Flowers of Cole.
Yeah, I'll start with Cole. Let's end on the positive. Brandon Aubrey, Dallas kicker, for hitting a cheerleader with the kickoff, but I mean, she's fine. But you missed the kickoff so badly. You hit her in the head on the fly. Like,
Yeah,
how bad of a kick is that? And
it's pretty bad.
it's not like she's standing on the 1 yard line.
No.
Like, this is like way out of bounds, and they hit her right in the back of the head. So it's just a weak effort on a kickoff.
Yeah. And that was that happened in another game too, where it was the Detroit Minnesota game at the before the end of the half, I think, where the kicker just kicked it out of bounds, and then all of a sudden they only had 20 seconds left, but now they only need like 20 yards
Oh,
to
and
get
it
in the
cost them
field
3
goal
points.
range. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That
it's
was big mistake. Yeah, good call there.
those are terrible. So
Hang on, I got one more. I'll stay with the Cowboys. Now, this is an article I read afterwards. I actually don't know if this is a true motivation, so I'm going to qualify this lump of coal for the Cowboys franchise. If this is true, and if they sat Cooper Rush, which then caused him to miss out on $250,000 bonus, that's shame on that franchise if that's true.
if that is
Like,
true,
what do you do? Look at all these other teams that are completely on their player's side and trying to get their player their bonus.
Yeah.
Cooper Rush deserves any bonus he's getting because he actually looked like the better quarterback this year.
Absolutely.
Or he won a bunch of games.
He single-handedly saved your season because they did make the playoffs. They went 7-10, but it could have been way worse.
Way worse. And so if there's any truth to this, that they sat him, first of all, okay, let's say there's not even any truth to that. Still, that's a lump of coal. Like, let that guy have the last game too.
Yeah,
like Lance is nothing. Like, there's no why you don't need to. What are you examining? What the future is? No, Cooper Rush is clearly one of the best backups in the league.
Yeah,
and to sit him, no, and it's not like they don't know he's missing out on a bonus there. Somebody knows that. If not, the whole administration knows that. So,
And it's so small compared to some of the other ones, right? Some of the other
Right.
ones are $1 million and $6 million and stuff.
Right.
So for something that is arguably the most valuable franchise, like in North America, in terms
Oh
of
no, the
billions of
world. It's
dollars,
actually the most valuable sports
more,
franchise in
was
the
it more than
world.
the Premier League teams? I wasn't sure if it
Yes.
was okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for 250,000, if that is the case, that's really
Yeah.
terrible.
So it's a big qualifier if. So it's a major lump of coal if that was
I
the
can't imagine they wanted to see what Trey Lance could do in the last game of the season for anything
no.
meaningful.
So it's a major lump of coal if that was on purpose to save 250 grand. And
Yeah.
it's a small lump of coal because regardless, let that guy play the final game.
Yeah. Or at least the first half or whatever triggers the bonus thing or
Get him the
something else.
bonus. Yeah. All right. I have one more coal. Do you have any
Yeah,
more
go
coal?
ahead.
The Jets for the trick play that almost
Oh,
got Devontae Adams murdered. Like, what do you do? I mean, I don't know if that's just bad execution, but Jesus, Ramsey chopped him in half at the end of that play. That play was doomed the whole way, but I mean, good thing that Adams didn't get hurt because that was, or it wasn't an even bigger player that hit him. I think the only reason he's not injured right now is because it was a cornerback that hit him versus a linebacker, somebody bigger. But I mean, anyone who knows what I'm talking about, that play was doomed, and all it did was just get Adams just smoked at the end of that play.
Well, and just to be fair for Jalen Ramsey, 6'1", 208. He's not exactly small.
Well, but I mean,
but you're
we're
right.
not
It wasn't
talking
linebacker, defensive lineman, but it was he's an excellent cornerback, and it killed him.
And he's big, and he's a Pro Bowl. He's going to be probably a Hall of Famer, and he smoked him. And it's not like what he's right. He's a big corner. But anyways, the point is that play was utterly doomed, and all it did was put Devontae Adams in a bit of a risk for injury.
Yep.
All right. Flowers.
Yep. So got a lot of flowers. We've covered a lot of people already.
Sure.
Joe Burrow looked amazing. Had no running game. Won the game. Too bad they didn't make the playoffs. Jamar Gibbs. I mean, Montgomery wasn't there. All he did was get 4 touchdowns. He had a lot of receptions too, right? It was 5
receptions for 31 yards and a TD, 23 rush, 129 yards, 3 TDs. I mean, that guy was just going off.
So good.
Yeah.
And Bo Nix had it started the game was like 13 for 13 or something. Now, again, it was against the Kansas City defense squad. But look, listen, if you want momentum's a thing, especially going into the playoffs. And then what's the difference between like Pittsburgh, for example, versus Denver going in? Like, who do you think feels better about their team going in the playoffs? Right.
Absolutely.
So, because even though Denver is, they've got a tough one at Buffalo, like it's, I still
they're feeling good after.
Yeah.
You still have to like complete the passes. You still have to block the players. You still have to tackle the other team. It's not like the other team's just standing aside.
Yeah.
So okay. So Bijan Robinson, 28 for 170, 2 TDs. That guy, is he top 3?
He's really good.
And of all, but specifically in zone
not
run,
on a great team too. Oh, they do the zone run really well. That whole team does.
He's so good at finding. He's really patient, like really patient back there, just finding where the hole is whenever it needs. He kind of has like McCaffrey's degree of vision and patience out there. It looks like they don't throw the ball to him much, but man, as far as like running, that scheme, maybe it's just the scheme and how he sees the field. But Jesus, he never really goes down on first contact. And it's not like it's dramatic looking the way he's avoiding people. I mean, he can do like legitimate lateral cuts, as all that stuff too. Like, but somewhere in there, he just seems. One announcer just said he looks really slippery. Like somehow he's always moving forward, even after contact. You and I always talk about like the best ones look like when the run is over, they don't really ever go backwards. They either end right where they are or somehow still fall forward.
Yeah.
So he's a beauty.
Yeah. Justin Herbert too, 28 for 36, 346 yards.
Yeah, we didn't really talk much about the Chargers. There's shirts up here somewhere.
Yeah, but then that's another team like going in the right direction, going in the playoffs. That's also a good one. So
Bears for ending the losing streak on the final play of the regular season.
Yeah, a game that mattered too.
Yeah. Right? Oh, yes. I almost could give Cole for the Packers for ending the season on a real down note there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bears good. That was a 10-game losing streak and 11-game losing streak to the Packers. Apparently, I don't know if that's specific to home or away, but that has to feel at least a little bit better. I know they're in utter turmoil and they have to revamp the coaching staff and all of that stuff. But at least they ended the losing streak. How much would that suck finishing
That
the
would
season on
that
11-game
I
losing
think that
streak?
makes a big difference for next year
Yeah.
because like finishing on some positive,
Against the
and then
Packers.
yeah,
That matters.
some
It's
a
not like they
playoff
beat a
team.
team that yes, a
Yep.
playoff team in your division that
Yep.
you haven't beaten in forever.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a big difference, and it's a real different like they're going to remember that in the off-season workouts and the
Mhm.
meetings and the planning for next season. Like
Yep.
they took care of business in that game, which is
Yep.
important.
Going out on a high note.
Yep.
All right, that's all the flowers I have. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that was it for me too.
All right, well that's week 18 in the books. That's another season in the books, and come back to the channel, and we're gonna do our picks and previews of the wild card round, and
Great
then we're gonna
weekend in football.
also and also I guess there's only 2 bowl games, but we're gonna pick and preview the 2 bowl games left to go.
Yep.
Right, we'll catch you later.